Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teach, Learn, Share, a podcast that thoughtfully explores teaching and learning practices in higher ed. I'm Jasmine Parent. This podcast is brought to you by Teaching and Academic Programs at McGill University, also known as TAP. We're recording today from Montreal, Quebec, on unceded land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We honor their stewardship as we live and work on these lands. So welcome back. We're so happy to have you all here with us again today for a brand new series. In this series, we will be focusing on and deep diving into generative AI in teaching and learning. And I'm joined today by Adam Finkelstein, the Associate Director of Learning Environments at TAP. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Jasmine. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Adam also happens to be my supervisor, which is kind of fun. I'm happy to welcome him to the podcast today because he's very knowledgeable about the topic on generative AI in general and how it's integrated in and impacted higher ed over the last few years. Adam, do you want to briefly introduce yourself and give an overview about your journey with generative AI in higher ed? I know this could be a really long segment alone, but this, I think, will just help situate our listeners and better understand how you fit into this new Gen AI landscape here at McGill.
So I've been at McGill for 25 years now, from the very beginning to now, and involved in every single sort of like massive change or disruption that's happened within the space of higher ed. I think there's a lot of common themes among these disruptions, and these disruptions cause a lot of havoc when they first sort of show up in our higher ed space. And generative AI is a particularly interesting one, part of it being because it really is a fundamental shift in how we're interacting with technology and we're interacting with our students and interacting with our teaching. One of the interesting things about AI is that we've been using AI for a long time. Machine learning has been around for, decades. Every time we do a Google search, there's AI involved. But I think, everything sort of changed for the public in November of 2022 when I think a number of us first heard about this weird thing called ChatGPT and then, logged in, created an account, and started to actually have a conversation with a computer or with some sort of thing, which was a first for many of us, including myself. And it was kind of a holy crap moment, I think, is really what happened in that November, where, you start to have a conversation realizing that it's no longer the clippy, kind of office integration or Eliza, which dates me even farther back, where it was like a Rogerian therapist. And every time, you asked a question, it would basically rephrase the question and ask it back to you to keep commenting. And so at that November, I remember thinking like, this is monstrous. Like, this is crazy huge. I can't believe people don't know about this yet. What's interesting is when you start to chart from there to now, we're in a totally different landscape and we're not even, a couple of years out. And what's incredible is when you start to look at these types of technologies, every month it gets better and better and better. It's amazing as you start to use it more and more about how useful it can be. But as you use it more and more, you realize how disruptive it really is going to be and how disruptive it is right now. And I think that's what we're sort of hitting in higher ed is it's gotten past that beginning flirting with the idea stage in 2022, 2023, 2024 last year. It started to rise and students are starting to really start to use it. And some of the recent stats that they looked at with student surveys is like 60-something% of students were using AI last year. And now in 2025, we're up to like 85%, which basically is we're at the point where every single student is using AI now. And most instructors, most people are as well. So it's technology that's not just pervasive, it's everywhere. Like all disruptions that sort of come in and start to mess with things as well, we can't avoid it. It's going to be in our faces, and it's already starting to shape the bottom of the tree when you look at things like assessments and AI and essays and things that people are generating and writing. So all of those, long-winded sort of responses around it, that here we have a technologies that can fundamentally change the way we do teaching and learning from K to gray, as they say, or K to the end. And it really is going to cause us to question why we are here at university, what our purpose is, what are we trying to do as students, what's the purpose of the degree of the education that we have. And every disruptive technology in the last 50 years has done this. But I think AI is doing this to an extent that we've never seen before. And there's sort of some ideas, maybe AI is the last disruptive technology that we've got, because it's really going to shake things up in a way that we've never seen before.
That's such a powerful idea that AI might be the last major disruption we face in higher education. And if that's true, it really challenges us to rethink pretty much everything, how we teach, how students learn, and what the university experience is meant to be at its core. It's very obvious to me that Gen AI has entered the chat, as students may say, with or without our full consent. And it's kind of rocked a lot in the higher ed landscape. So we're hoping to use this podcast series as our way of exploring the big questions that we all have. We feel it's important to share real stories from instructors, practical strategies, and examples of how generative AI is being used or deliberately not used in teaching and learning. So in this first episode, we want to start by laying the foundation, and we'll offer 3 key recommendations to help instructors think through their approach to AI, whether you're embracing it, whether you're avoiding it, or whether you're still kind of figuring that out. Our first recommendation is to be intentional. So be intentional about how you choose or choose not to integrate AI into your course. This is about making the conscious decision. Are you designing AI into your teaching and assessments, or are you designing it out? Adam, what advice would you give instructors who are still unsure about how to approach that decision?
I think it's a really good point about the being intentional. And I think the one danger that is really looming is it's not really AI that's danger. The danger is ignorance and ignoring the impact that a technology like this can have on our teaching and learning. The one thing we don't want anyone to want to do is to put their head in the sand, pretend it's not there, or be in a scenario where, you want to say like AI has nothing to do with our course. There is no place for it anywhere in our class. I think that's a bit of a mistake. AI is here. It's going to be in everything that we do, and not acknowledging it kind of does students a disservice, and it even does instructors a disservice. It doesn't mean that AI needs to be used all the time. And I think that's where the idea that we've talked about quite a bit about designing it in or designing it out is there are times you might want to use AI and a time you might not want to use AI. One of the difficulties is that, instructors get stuck in a spot where thinking that they have to use AI for everything, or that students are going to use AI for everything. And again, there are classes where AI is not going to be useful, or areas where you don't want AI to be used. The idea is to think that through in advance. What we don't want to be in a scenario where people are caught off guard. We should also step back for a minute and make sure we're clear that this is a very difficult time. It's not easy to do this. Instructors are being asked to teach with something that they've never had any experience with, let alone had any experience in teaching scenario. So, here we are where, let's say an instructor might be teaching a course in, let's say, English literature. And the way that they've always taught that particular course, AI has now swooped in and said, well, that essay that you actually want students to do, the way you've asked the students to do it, AI can do it just as well as the students. So we can say, well, we're going to try and ban AI's use and make sure that students are the only ones doing it. We're going to bring them to a classroom, lock them in a room, and to say, okay, we're going to watch you write it out by hand. But is this really what we want students to do? Is that an authentic task? One of the things that we're seeing is like, well, even the idea of what an essay is changing. And we're watching all of these things change in real time. And that can be a really scary moment. So I think one of the things that we can do is think about, well, if we want to design AI out of our class, then we need to think about a number of different things to do that. And to do that, to be intentional, we have to think about things like, well, we need to emphasize process over product. So it's not necessarily handing in the final paper. It's the process of the paper that's important. And we have to think about what are students doing in that process? How are they thinking through the beginning to the end of that synthesis of their own ideas. And if all we're worrying about is the product, well, then yeah, AI is going to be able to replace that product pretty quickly. But if we want to design AI out of a scenario like that, we need to think about what can we do to expose the process and get students to be clear about that. We can focus on things that are localized and personal. So saying, well, the essay is going to be about the class discussion we had. Suddenly it's, well, AI can't summarize the class discussion, at least not easily, unless you're recording the class and a whole bunch of other things that will go with it. Or we can have students, gather their own data. So, there's nothing more authentic than becoming a data scientist to yourself. Instead of reporting on other people doing things, why not find out and do things yourself? So I think there's a lot of different options for designing AI out, but it does require people to take a moment of pause and to stop and think, what do I want to do? What are the goals of my assignments? What do I really want to do with those assignments? And what do I want students to learn? And likewise, we can also spin that and say, well, you could also say, instead of the designing AI, you could lean completely in and design AI into the entire task and say, well, maybe actually AI shouldn't write that paper, and students should be evaluating the responses or evaluating the results that AI is doing. Maybe the students should be working with AI to create that particular essay. Maybe the writing out of the essay is less important. Maybe it should be a presentation, and the students are actually working with AI to help them analyze the data that they're looking at. So there's lots of different options, but I think in all scenarios, if we think of AI as a collaborator in that process, it can help students gain the skills that they need that they're going to use when they graduate. Because there's no question, by the time students graduate, they're going to be doing tons of things with AI. And we need to be able to equip everyone with the literacy skills required to be able to do that. At the same time, translate what those literacy skills mean for the discipline you're in.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I mean, being intentional is always about taking a step back, looking at your learning outcomes, which we might be forgetting about. What do you want your students to do and why? And I do empathize that it's sometimes difficult to fathom a new way of doing things when that's not the way you were taught. Those are not necessarily the skills that were emphasized when you were a student. We're like in a whole new world now. So regardless of whether you're going to choose to use AI or design it out, just make the decision and don't just stick your head in the sand and kind of continue business as usual, because the reality is that we're not in business as usual. Things have changed and are changing, and we need to kind of address it head on and be intentional with how we move forward.
And we know that the detectors don't work. There's no way to know if somebody used AI. The only real way to know somebody didn't use AI is to know your student. And one of the difficult things when it comes to scale at universities is that with classes of 30, 40, 50, 500 students, it's very hard to know your students. So if you don't know your students, then yes, AI, you will never know if what they write or what they produce was AI produced or by them. I think that's one of the difficult things with any of these disruptive technologies. They tend to target scale as the biggest problem. And maybe for good reason. Maybe we need to rethink that, that large, massive class may not be the best idea. What can we do to make it smaller? What can we do to make it more connected? But I think those are things that, again, are shaking the roots of higher ed around that concept of scale and that concept of being able to have a production line of students, as opposed to getting students to stop and reflect on their thinking process.
All right, so let's move on to the second recommendation. We have set expectations as the second recommendation. So whether or not, whatever you choose to do in terms of being intentional with having AI designed in or out of your course and assessments, you also need to then communicate what your decision is to your students. What advice would you give instructors on how to communicate this to their students?
This is definitely something where it absolutely should be in a course outline, and giving the student an idea of what is the expected behavior within this course and within the bounds of this course. And that might mean, unrestricted use of AI. Like, you can use it for anything you want. You do whatever you want to do with it, etc. You just have to cite your sources and tell me that you're doing and working with AI. Or maybe it's restricted. It's like, well, you can use AI, but it's only going to be in these scenarios that we're going to do that. Or maybe you're not going to use AI at all. But I think those are the things about setting that expectation up front is really critical, because one of the things we don't want is, you don't want a scenario where students are unsure. And it works both ways. What you can get is a scenario where students can get worried and say, well, well, do I have to prove that I wrote everything now? Am I in a scenario where, like, if I submit something, can I be accused of something I didn't do? Like, I didn't use AI. I didn't have AI write it. But what if somebody thinks I wrote AI? What if I put in too many dashes? Is that going to set off, like, indicators? Like, these are all worries that are going through students' heads, and we have to be really clear. Like, we do not use AI detectors. It's not something we have in university. We need to be clear with that, and that, them writing a paper, we're not going to assume that they didn't write anything. But also we have to provide them with the thoughts and support around, well, how do you cite AI? Like, what do you do with that? Like, how do you work through those ideas? If we're going to write something, it's very clear in the code of conduct that you cannot claim something you didn't write as your own writing. But when you work with AI, it's not so simple. It's not as simple as the code always states that. If I get an idea from AI, well, how do I cite that idea? Where do I cite that? Do I just put it generally at the bottom? Hey, I consulted with AI at some point. But I may have done the same thing with my roommate. If I talk with my roommate about a particular idea I had for a paper and they gave some feedback and thoughts, I don't cite my roommate. So why do I cite AI? So, like, all of these things are, it sounds simple, but it's not once we start to unpack. And I think, AI is messing around with things like authorship and citation styles and things. And I think we just have to be very, very clear, as clear as we can be, with what the expectations are for use within our particular classes.
And I will say post like November 2022, you were seeing like these short course outline statements that were maybe 2 sentences long, but now I'm seeing more and more, like almost maybe an entire page dedicated to what the expectations are in that class regarding AI. And then more instruction worked into like assignment instructions. And I think that's so important. Like, people really need to understand and know what they're expected to do.
And that takes a lot of thought.
It does.
Time. And I think but it's a really good point about trying to say, like, the clearer we can be about everything, the better off everyone will be. As you said, with assignments, like being clear with an assignment, because as instructors know, if you're not clear, they're going to ask questions. Yeah. So if you don't upfront tell them, how long does it have to be? Where does it have to be? How you're going to, they're going to ask. So if you want to be able to mitigate that and then clarify some of those expectations, it's going to make everything easier. And don't avoid it, because AI is there. You need to address it head on. If you're asking students to do something, then you have to think, well, they're probably going to do something with AI. What can I say about that? What do I need to say about that?
Which moves us nicely into our third and final recommendation, which is be transparent. So would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think transparency is it's a really good instructional theme, period, is being clear about levels of expertise. Like, we are all learning about AI. None of us are, quote, experts. I mean, some of us have just used it a bit more than others, but the reality is I think every single person learns something new with AI. Like, I can't tell you how often I'll sit down and I think I know what I'm doing, and then I go and use it, and oh my God, I go, like, I'd never even heard of using it this way. I think that's a really, it can be scary, but I tend to think of it as exciting, because it means that, like, you're always going to be learning something new.
I have an example of one of the instructors that presented at our last session during the Gen AI week. And he had a full page on his course outline that talked about different ways to use or not to use Gen AI in the course. And at the bottom, he kind of informally cited that Gen AI helped him write this course outline. And so I think that doing things like that provides transparency. It models like how students also should be like engaging and using it. So there's another just small example of what you can do.
Absolutely. And I think that's also transparency with the idea that if you're using AI to help analyze, let's say, student work that they're submitting, it is a good idea to tell them in the same way that you would expect them to tell you that they're using it. And it's transparency with everything. The more transparent we can be about, our course within the greater society and how it exists. Higher ed does not exist in a vacuum. We are interconnected with the rest of society around us. And in many ways, we should be more than just interconnected. We should be involved in the society around us. And AI is in everything that we're doing. So I think that acknowledging that and working with that is going to be critical. And acknowledging the limitations, like what are some of the ethics of what we're doing? How is AI changing our profession? How is AI changing society? Is this something that we're happy with? Is this something that we want to think about? What are the guardrails in place? I think the one thing that we can really be sure about is change. It's like the only thing constant is change. AI is going to get better and better and better. And as it gets better, we have to think about what do we want our students to do? If we can't come up with ideas about what we want students to do, then we really have to really need to think hard about the purpose of the course within the broader context of the degree. And we may find that in the next few years that entire degrees may need to be rethought. We may need to not only change and offer new degrees, but stop doing degrees we may be doing for 100 years. And I think that's also scary. And I think we need to look through those things very clearly, kind of cut through some of the hype, get to some of the details and figure out what we're going to do. And we can only really do that if we're transparent, not just within the class, but transparent at the university. And it's one of the key reasons why we built the module that we built for everyone in a way that wasn't separating students and instructors. We had lots of long conversations about this with the advisory boards and, how do we build a module to help everybody using AI? Do we create a student one and an instructor one? And we talked at the very end and ended off with one module where everything is available for everybody. And I think the idea behind that was, because we want everybody to see what everybody is being told. And so that idea that if students can go look at what instructors are being advised about when it comes to integrating AI, or instructors can look and see, well, how are students using AI? What are they being told? What are they being, advised when using AI for studying, as a good example? And I can only imagine, I look back into my, undergrad days. Can you imagine what it would be like to have a study tool available to you that could generate practice exams and practice tests at an unlimited scale? I can't imagine. I remember how many times we were scrounging around for examples of like, oh, I got this big paper coming up. Well, not paper, but like a giant final exam. And it's like, I've done the practice exam. And, you go and ask the instructor and the instructor says, well, I can't create unlimited practice questions. AI can.
Yeah.
And, watching my own children going through the scenario where it's like they can create unlimited practice tests. Imagine how much better they are going to be at understanding the material than I was, because they are going to be able to get a level of practice that I never got. Like, that's where the power of AI is helpful, is that we can actually bootstrap learning and give students a leg up, and give instructors a leg up too, but give everybody a leg up in a way that we never had the ability to do before. So that's what I think is really exciting, is when you look at some of the ways that students can use AI to help their studying, help increase their capacity. And I think that's what we want to do with AI is not looking at ways to, as cognitive replacement. It's not necessarily about how can we outsource AI to our brain to AI. It's, well, how can we enhance our brain with AI? What can we do with AI to really leverage it, build our own thinking, and give us a leg up in our own work, our own life in general.
And that's why I think it's more important than ever, like as a higher ed institution, like we need to acknowledge it. We need to teach people how to use it properly, because it is a very powerful tool when used correctly in terms of learning.
And we need to use it. But we have to make sure that we are providing environments that are safe, that people are using things like Copilot, using the walled gardens ones we have, so that intellectual property and privacy are secure. These are going to be really important things moving forward. And we need to be able to model that good behavior as much as we can.
Absolutely. So on that note, I feel like we're ending on a pretty positive note. So we'll end here. Just to reiterate, our first recommendation for instructors at the beginning of the term is to be intentional about your choice to design AI in or out of your course. Set your expectations once that choice has been made and communicate it to your students, and always be transparent with your students, with I think everybody. I think we need to be talking about this with everyone.
It's great that we've got this to kick off our podcast, because I think one of the things that's going to be great this year is to talk we need to talk a lot, and we need to really talk to everybody about AI and figure out ways that we can use it effectively moving forward to help improve, at the end of the day, our teaching and learning at the university.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Adam, for being here with us today. This was really fun. I look forward to the episode being released and future conversations. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to Teach, Learn, Share and tell others about it. Until next time.